Thank you for tuning into the Talking Tech monthly video series. Today, our guest is Matt Douglas, Senior Director of Sales Engineering with CBTS. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. I appreciate it, John.
Yeah, well, I know one of the questions that our customers, regularly ask is, what's going on with SASE? Who's the right vendor for me to use for SASE? And I know CBTS does a lot in that space, so we appreciate you tuning in and giving us some background there.
No, I'm excited to kind of go through this and see, to kind of see what we can impart on the folks here. I appreciate it.
Sounds good. Well, tell us a little bit about you and your background, and what elevated you, or what your journey was to becoming the Senior Director of Engineering at CBTS.
At CBTS, yeah. Actually, I've been here about 17 years now, John. I don't know if you knew it was that long, but I had been involved with technology through the years, and I started an ISP, an internet service provider in Indianapolis in 2000. And it grew to a decent size. In about 2008, CBTS was looking to acquire some additional companies around the Midwest, and I joined CBTS then. And it's just been a great ride. I've had a number of kind of experiences of being, kind of an individual sales engineer. I was a product manager on our UCaaS side for a while, and now I manage a group of sales engineers that support, partners like you guys in the field. So CBTS has just been a great ride for me. We're about a 25-year-old company, a couple thousand employees. We do around $1 billion a year or so in revenue. So a number of different managed services, of which, SD-WAN and SASE are one of those things. So.
Yeah, I know we've worked with each other on several different customer applications over the years, and always appreciate your insight and what you guys are doing over there. So when you talk about the $1 billion in revenue that CBTS has, tell us a little bit about your client profile. Who's an ideal client for CBTS?
Sure, absolutely. We kind of have our roots really. First, we started out in the Midwest 25 years ago, kind of working with mid-sized companies, kind of companies in the 500 to kind of 10,000 employee range. And really over the last 25 years have grown a book of business or a set of capabilities that we're about half a VAR or reseller, about half of our business is selling kind of, the best of breed OEM solutions, the names you'd expect, HP, Cisco, Palo, these kinds of things. And the other half of our business has evolved over the last 20 years or so is in managed services, taking network services, UCaaS, security services, and turning those into as a service offerings. Because, like you, I'm sure seen in the channel, more and more customers out there are, instead of wanting to buy kind of point solutions and a box with a whole bunch of features and go deploy it themselves, they want some assistance in designing it, speccing it out, installing it, and even day two support. So we've kind of grown to be, if you would, like big enough to matter, but right-sized enough to be flexible to deliver custom applications, custom managed services into companies, kind of more mid-sized to lower enterprise.
That fits perfectly with the TruPoint story as well. I mean, that's where we spend a lot of our time, is in those mid-sized organizations as well. We find that, typically you've got a smaller IT team, they've got a lot of demands on their time, and they can use help and guidance in finding those right IT solutions. So I think what's interesting to me about CBTS and the way that you guys have grown is kind of that combination of OEM and managed support, right? And I think it gives you a unique perspective because you have some of the born in the cloud solutions that you guys are working with. You've got some point solutions you guys have been working with and have a good depth of experience in both of them. And I think that kind of, when we talk about SASE, right, and what's happening within that space, I think it gives you guys a little bit
crazy, right? The growth in that space has been crazy.
It is, and it's kind of one of those things where when you ask me what is cloud, right? And there's 100 different definitions of it. Well, I think now what is SASE is kind of getting that way, right? There's a lot of different flavors out there, and that's what we're seeing with customers. So what does SASE mean to you when someone says that? What is your definition, and how do you define that?
Yeah, because there's been a lot of definitions, right, as this term's come
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's come from the evolution, if you would, of SD-WAN was first out there in the industry. And then as we started to connect businesses together, what was happening with their security fabric, right? And so for us, SD-WAN really is about taking SASE is really about taking an intelligent SD-WAN edge and combining it with an intelligent cloud security fabric. Oftentimes people call that SSE. So really for us, SASE is SD-WAN plus SSE equals SASE. And really this journey we've seen customers on is that they want a ubiquitous security fabric, the same security experience, whether I'm working from my laptop in the office in Indianapolis or the office in New York City or from my home or from a Starbucks. It needs to be that same experience. And certainly it's been driven as well by where applications are, because again, when we first met customers 10 years ago, those applications were all sitting in data centers or headquarters. And now those applications are in SaaS applications. They're and maybe people are moving things to AWS or Azure, to other third-party resources. And so this idea of the fact that our applications can be in any cloud, we're kind of in a multi-cloud environment. Well, then my security fabric's got to be able to support that. That's something that SASE can help our customers with in the journey.
Sure. And I mean, with COVID and all of the impacts and the remote workforce, and now that people are moving more back into the office, that's only hyper accelerated all of that, right? So the ability to connect in a good way from those, remote offices, like you said, whether it be a Starbucks or whether it be somebody's living room, that's and being able to secure that connection is what we're seeing with clients as well. What
the other thing too, real quick, I might add, the other thing too is that the journey now is ZTNA. We've
right.
heard the term ZTNA for a long time again from the vendors out there. But those technologies are now maturing, and we're seeing more and more folks who are realizing that the standard VPN technologies of kind of VPN back into the data center headquarters and having a pretty wide look at all the resources back at a data center headquarters, you need to limit that to kind of a ZTNA fabric. When I'm, again, working from my laptop, maybe Matt only needs to see certain applications back at the data center or even certain SaaS applications. So we're seeing a big movement too of customers starting to look at ZTNA in ways that they just didn't do in the past.
Yeah, the technology landscape is not getting any less complex for the IT directors and the CIOs.
Yep.
That's for sure. So talking about that, what are some of the key challenges that you see SASE or ZTNA solving for businesses?
Yeah. Well, I go back to kind of the ubiquitous, consistent security fabric, no matter where I'm working from, so that, the alerts, the analyzation, the threat hunting is the same, whether I'm working from the office, whether I'm working from home, whether I'm working from Starbucks. That's a big deal. Certainly, growing compliance regulations and growing cybersecurity insurance regulations are driving a lot of this change. I'm sure you've seen this with your customers, right? It's getting to the point where cyber insurance people are now requiring certified backup and DR plans, certified MDR plans, things that, again, you just didn't see 2 and 3 years ago. So I think this is being driven by, a lot of times by compliancy, by cybersecurity, but then even from competitive things. I mean, we're starting to see our customers more talk about that security is part of their brand, not something that just IT does, but security is part of marketing, that when they're talking to their customers or their third-party vendors or the people in their ecosystem, their security fabric is becoming part of their brand and part of their value as a company. So we're starting to see people invest more in security, certainly, than they did a couple of years ago.
That's for sure. The other thing, I mean, is, cloud adoption, right? We're seeing with our clients that have made that cloud transition, or, if they're a little bit slower to make that transition, that, laying a good SASE fabric or SASE network can provide a baseline for them to be able to access those applications in a good way, in a reliable way, and a consistent security experience as well. Are you guys seeing that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the beauties, right, of the right SD-WAN technologies at the edge too, is that these SD-WAN technologies, connected to multiple circuits, let's say a couple of fiber DIAs or maybe even a fiber and cable, can keep applications up and running. So one of the great things is, when I'm working behind an SD-WAN SASE edge, and I've got an important phone call, I'm working on an important document, I lose a circuit, I won't know any different. So that's some of the great things about some of those technologies, or, that was one of the big promises of SD-WAN to begin with. So this combination of an SD-WAN fabric being able to reliably get me to resources to keep applications up, even if I'm losing a circuit, combined with then the cloud security, ubiquitous cloud security, and then even ZTNA, capabilities, improve kind of VPN 2.0 capabilities back into applications in a data center or to the cloud. That's certainly where it's going, because I mean, when you talk to customers today and you start to ask them, okay, tell me your 10 most important applications and where do they sit? They are all over the place.
That's
And
for
the
sure.
traditional edge firewall can't handle that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you're talking about the different SASE solutions, right, there's definitely some differences between them. And I know you guys work with multiple different providers. So tell me a little bit about that. And then, hopefully here at the end, we're going to, spend some time on a whiteboard session to go through it as well. But what are the SASE solutions that you guys work with today within the CBTS portfolio?
CBTS portfolio, sure. So from a kind of SD-WAN perspective, an edge perspective, we are a Meraki shop, a Palo shop, and a VMware shop, VeloCloud. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things that's happened kind of in the industry in the last couple of years is it's always shifting, right? You got new players coming in, players maturing, et cetera. Palo is one of those stories of some maturity that's changed a lot in the Palo world. So Palo actually, as they came in, were doing some new work on their portfolio over the course of the last couple of years, bought a company called CloudGenix. I think you're probably familiar with them.
Absolutely.
CloudGenix was always very strong in keeping track of applications and reporting on applications, kind of layer 7 intelligence. And so for us, really, our portfolio is typically about Meraki and oftentimes, sometimes Umbrella, maybe connected in Meraki world, or then Palo or Velo at the edge and using Palo Prisma up in the cloud for security. Now, you and I talked before this conversation, you do a lot of work, I think, sometimes with Cato as well. And so really, as this industry's matured, Cato and Palo are kind of two of the leading single vendor SASE solutions out there, solutions that have got backbone networks, multiple POPs, both edge devices and cloud security. So for us, it's Meraki sometimes with some of our retail customers who that's good enough. And then for those customers needing mature cloud security services, it's Palo Prisma with either Palo or Velo at the edge.
One of the questions that we always get is, around latency, and we can dig into this in a whiteboard session if it makes more sense, but is around latency. If you go to, let's use that Palo Prisma or the Cato solution or one of the solutions where you're going through one of their POPs for the majority of your connections, assuming that you're going out to the outside world or even site to site. So how does that impact, the latency that you see in an application's performance?
Like you take Meraki as an example. Meraki has, let's say I get a couple of internet connections to Meraki. Meraki can kind of keep track of applications site to site, meaning Meraki to Meraki, anything is bookended by Meraki. But that traffic's just going across, quote, the raw internet, right? You start to look at solutions that people have built kind of global backhaul networks, and Cato is one of those. Palo is one of those too. I don't know if you're aware of that. That have taken their POPs and built, if you would, a private network behind it. It's actually still on the internet, but they use kind of private prioritized connections from the biggest tier 1 connectors, internet service providers out there. And so one of the advantages of some of these next generation SD-WAN platforms is when you're trying to send applications maybe coast to coast or between continents, is that this backhaul network becomes part of your SD-WAN routing fabric. So every location that's in this SD-WAN cloud, whether it's in the US, Canada, Latin America, EU, whatever, becomes part of a ubiquitous routing cloud. And those long haul destinations are in a prioritized, fashion in this kind of private network behind it. And so, yeah, those are some of the things that when we're talking to customers, we want to understand where are their applications, where is that, where are the key applications, where are they coming from, what are the routes we need to put, across, where are they going, either, across the coast, across the globe, et cetera, and try and match the right technology to that. But you're right, the more intelligent networks like Cato, like Palo, have built a global backhaul network to connect their POPs together.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and just spend a couple of minutes on a whiteboard. And if you can, just kind of help us visualize, because when we talk about the different solutions, customers sometimes will just get lost in the ether. So can you help us visualize, kind of that traditional network with the data center and where
Sure,
applications now
absolutely.
live today
Yeah,
and how it interacts with branches and individuals and that sort of thing? Walk through kind of your typical customer scenario in
sure.
2024. Right? You've got some applications in your data center, you've got some SaaS applications, you've got remote employees, you've got branches, and what does SASE do for that customer and how does it help?
Sure, absolutely. So, if you kind of take a look and think, all right, I got, a couple of branches out here, and it could be two, it could be, we've got customers with 600 branches, and you've got a data center or two, headquarters, but we'll in this case just kind of go off the data center and branch. You've got some kind of an SD-WAN appliance at the edge. And although we still have customers that we're using MPLS, like we have actual customers that still need MPLS in this fabric, maybe connecting some of their distribution centers or facilities that they just can't, like they can't just emotionally leave MPLS yet. Some people aren't quite ready. See that a lot of times in financial institutions. But most of the time, customers are looking at, two internet connections or more. All right, these SD-WAN boxes sometimes can take up to 8 different internet connections.
Sure.
The first thing that really typically happens right in an SD-WAN environment is that I'm connecting these locations together, and SD-WAN is automatically building an auto VPN across that. It's building an environment where all the traffic is IP and IPsec encrypted between these locations. And even one of the things we pride ourselves on is talking to a customer again and understanding what are their key applications and where do they sit, right? Because we still oftentimes we still got applications that are sitting back at the data center, right? And then we're starting to see more and more SaaS applications out there. People are, moving to SaaS for their ERP, et cetera. There's certainly, practically everybody is on Office 365. So, but one of the first things this technology does is enable the kind of intelligent routing of an application. So let's say that I'm on a PC and I want to get to this application over here at the data center. I could be working on an application and just literally lose an entire internet segment, and you won't have any idea it happened. So that's the first benefit of this, is that internal site-to-site traffic, whether it's PCs coming back to a data center, whether it's phone calls that are coming back to a data center and going out, or phone calls going site to site. You can literally be doing your work and lose an internet connection or have an internet connection go in brownout, and this can automatically fail over.
Now, when you're talking about the different platforms that you guys have, is that the same platform to platform when you're going from, branch to data center or another branch where you have an SD-WAN appliance?
There are some big differences. So I mentioned Meraki. Meraki is kind of an SD-WAN light product. It's good enough for a number of situations. But typically the moment we've got customers who've got applications that are sitting at a data center or that are sitting important SaaS or Office 365, then we're recommending basically technologies that have got a gateway out there, that have got a cloud security fabric and have got a gateway. And that would be things like, Prisma, Palo SD-WAN plus Prisma, or VeloCloud plus Prisma, or your Cato. When you talk about Cato, Cato's the same kind of thing, having its cloud security layer out there. And when you do that, you can literally be on an application out to Office 365 or SaaS, and again, lose an internet connection and you'd have no idea. So this combination of intelligent edge plus intelligent cloud resources means that I can, in a multi-cloud environment where those applications are site to site, site to data center, or site to cloud, I can keep them up and running and fix them, even in brownouts, or keep them up and running when I get a blackout on a particular connection. So there are some significant differences, in some of these technologies, and that's where you guys or us would come in and do some consulting and see how we might help somebody.
Sure. Now, you said, Meraki with being sort of an SD-WAN light. Now, let's assume that, they weren't going to a SaaS application. They were just going branch to branch. In those situations, that would still fail over in real time, right? You're not losing the application.
It does fail over in real time. You're not losing the application, although there's some differences in how quickly it fails over.
Okay.
But again, Meraki, if we were talking Meraki going site to site here, and you lost a connection, then it would fail over and keep that up and keep the voice up. It would keep that application up. But if you were talking in Meraki land of site to, Amazon, it's not going to do that because there's no Meraki termination out here. So in that situation, I'd be going out one pipe, and if I lose that pipe, I'm going to have to reset a session up, and you'll lose an application.
Now, how does this play with remote users? So let's say we're not at the branch and we don't have an actual, edge appliance.
No, that's a great question. So again, these more advanced environments, so call it Cato, call it Palo. When I'm sitting out here and I'm working on my PC, so first of all, I'm working my PC here, right? I'm going out with, traditionally there used to be a firewall here or back here at the data center. So now the firewall is sitting up in the cloud, right? So that firewall sitting in the cloud, if I'm at a PC, I'm protected in that cloud firewall, that full next generation firewall services up here. But the same thing with a PC. I'm working from a PC and now I'm working from home. I have that same protection. So all of the stuff up here that we think about of IDS, IPS, malware, SSL decryption of sites, all that, that's what I talked about earlier about a ubiquitous security fabric. So these next generation SASE solutions are not only, they're giving me the same security plane, if you would, whether I'm in network or out of network, because everything's going through cloud security, finding the nearest POP, et cetera, and going through cloud security. So now basically my PC is traveling with a next generation firewall no matter where it goes.
Does that also help with not only security, but does it help with the traffic shaping or the performance of the network if you're on a remote PC or a laptop?
Some people could argue that. I mean, the PC, so there's a story that this PC is going to connect to the nearest POP, and that POP is also put in big data centers, like the Equinix data centers around the country, where a lot of content service providers are there. And so you could argue that that would end up being possibly a better connection than just going raw. I'm not sure I'm completely convinced of that part because the internet access in the United States is pretty ubiquitous, but I keep using that word. But yes, there's a story to be made that I'm also, when I'm connecting the POP, I'm going to get a more reliable service to my applications because these POPs are in big data centers where all the network service providers meet.
Well, and that's helpful because if you're talking to a salesperson for one provider or another provider, they're going to, tell you these stories, as you say, right? Which there can be an argument made for them. But, I think that some of the value that CBTS or TruPoint and the providers that we work with can bring to the table is helping to flush out some of those differences provider to provider. So I appreciate you calling that out because I have seen that presented in different customer applications as this will solve all of the issues you have with your remote users.
Now it does, and that for right off the bat, as I talked about, we are delivering now a next generation firewall experience to every user, no matter where they're working from. That's a big deal, right? Now, typically, then customers as well are deploying some kind of an XDR or EDR solution that's becoming required.
Right.
And certainly the two big SASE providers we've just talked about here, Cato or Palo, both have those same plugins, right? So not only am I protecting that traffic out with the next generation firewall going out, but I'm also got XDR, EDR capabilities in that PC, watching what happens on that PC, being able to shut down things if something bad does happen. There's even a kind of isolation of opening files, these kinds of things. And so that's a big deal. And then more and more customers, right? We were always, like Meraki, like we were talking about Meraki, if I wanted to get back into the data center, I've got to use a Meraki AnyConnect client, and I got to come back to a specific Meraki box, and I get to that specific site. And oh, by the way, it is old VPN technology, meaning that once I get here, I kind of can see a lot of resources. And so what's also happening out there, and starting to even happen again with cybersecurity insurance, is people are starting to have to now talk about ZTNA, about a zero trust network architecture, because the old VPN clients aren't going to cut it anymore. So, Matt working for CBTS, there's only a certain amount of applications I need to see. There might be 2 applications back at my data center, and Salesforce and Dropbox or whatever that I need to see in SaaS, and then I want them to go through a firewall, and they're going to do URL filtering, that kind of stuff. So the other thing too is that these new fabrics, again, are not only giving me a next generation firewall wherever I go, they also typically have an XDR, EDR component of those PCs, so I'm keeping track of what happens at those PCs. And then these clients are also enabling a ZTNA fabric that I can be able to start to control access to applications, and then even start to layer on things like, data loss prevention and CASB services, these kinds of things. So, and again, you can't just do that with a firewall back at the data center. It just doesn't work anymore. It's the bottom line is, now in a multi-cloud environment with us working from anywhere, these are the kinds of technologies that are winning out and going to win out, in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes total sense, especially as more and more applications get pushed to the cloud, which every one of our customers right now is moving. If they aren't already mostly cloud-based, they are moving extra applications or additional applications into the cloud as we speak. So
and that you
super
mentioned
helpful.
that, and I didn't draw it in here, but you also think about, you're absolutely right. People are moving into more and more AWS and Azure, and these technologies now are extending those instances also into my private VPN. So this, you can kind of think about this world up here as a private VRF, like in the MPLS days. And so now I have this completely secure pathway to whether I'm going site to site, site to data center, site to AWS or Azure, or then site to out to the cloud for something. And then the same thing with my client, getting the same access to all these resources, but in a ZTNA fashion. So it's changing the game on, how people are securing applications, whether I'm working from brick and mortar or whether I'm working from a Starbucks.
One thing we haven't touched on yet, which obviously is important for a lot of our clients, is voice. Still there's a lot of clients that are still using, voice. Some still have a premise-based phone system that they, either have at their office, or let's say it's in the data center, using this example, so we're not redrawing anything. But a lot of them are also moving to cloud-based contact center applications. They have remote call center agents. How does voice play into the entire network that we're talking about here?
Oh, sure. Let me take this cloud, which was SaaS, and I'll just rename it UCaaS or CCaaS.
It's just another application in the cloud.
It really is. Now,
Yep.
it's an important application because it's sent using UDP, meaning that if you lose packets, they're gone. They can't be retransmitted, if you would. Not by the application, but these technologies, I mentioned it. So imagine I've got, I got a user down here on a phone network, and we still do have users out here who haven't quite moved to UCaaS, and they've got PBXs back at their data center, let's say.
Sure.
in this environment, this voice application, let me grab another color here. This voice application it's got to come back to that data center. But because we've got multiple paths here, and these paths are always being kept track of, the application's always being kept track of, I lose a connection right here, this voice path just going to follow right over the second one. And so you literally in 200 milliseconds, it detects the fact I've lost a connection, or this main connection is brown out, or this connection back to the data center is brown out, and moves that application and that flow over to the next best path. Some of these technologies as well can even use packet duplication and reassembly. So one of the interesting things is that, let's say I'm, delivering, voices leaving here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the front door of my branch. But by the time it gets to the data center, I got packet 1, I'm missing 2, 3 and 4 out of order, I'm missing 5, and I've got 6. I got a bunch of jitter, and I got packet loss, and I got a real problem. All right. Well, these technologies at the SD-WAN edge and in the core can actually see that now and start to say, wait a minute, I'm going to duplicate this stream. Unbeknownst to the application, unbeknownst to the phone, to the DSP in the phone, it starts duplicating it. I still got some problem here. I got, some cable company went out or whatever having a problem. Now maybe I'm missing packet 1, but I got 2, 3, 4, 5, and I got missing 6. Adds them all together, and now I got a happy phone call or a happy application, even though I got packet loss in the middle of this path. And so one of the reasons we were so bullish on these technologies when we got into them 7 years ago is that we put a big RFP out, and we built a test lab, and we started actually injecting packet loss in applications where it went site to site, site to data center, site to cloud, and found out we could actually carry a phone call in up to 20% packet loss and still be able to have an acceptable phone call, which was unheard of in the past. So the other thing about this, though, is we mentioned that some of these are cloud smart, right? Because we were just talking about a traffic going point to point from a location to a data center. If instead you imagine that this phone call now is going out to a UCaaS or CCaaS provider, it's the same kind of thing. The same technology and smarts. I could be on the phone talking to an important customer on a $10,000 deal or whatever, lose a connection, and it's just going to fail over the other pipe and have no idea that it happened. Or the same thing can happen on fixing packet loss as well. So that's the other beauty of these technologies is that it can just understand, it can build priorities around our most important applications, understand where they're going, and in the right kinds of scenarios like this, even fix packet loss.
Yeah, nobody loves being on that phone call when you're all of a sudden you're chopping up, or you're trying to understand the other person. They sound like a robot, or you lose the call altogether. So very, very important. So when you look back at those technologies that we're talking about that can do the packet duplication, has there been a lot of change over the last 7 years since this technology's come out? And where do you see it going as we peer into our crystal ball of the future?
Sure. There certainly has been change. I mean, you and I have seen it. Cato has been very important in the industry in the last 3 or 4 years. You go back 3 years ago, Palo really didn't count. Palo got a new CEO like 4 years ago, identified that although they had strength in the security name and the edge firewall, they really didn't have a very good cloud story. And I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars spent in R&D and in acquiring new technologies. Like, they bought CloudGenix. I think maybe I mentioned that earlier, but they bought CloudGenix, right, which has been a successful product. And so Palo's probably the biggest change in all the portfolios. And that's what we've always been, a big Palo shop, but it was more customer premise data center firewalls. And so when we saw this change going on, we were one of the early service providers to sit down with them and say, okay, how do we take what is sometimes been Palo's complicated SKUs, and take your new cloud services, your new Prisma services and your new SD-WAN services in the edge. how do we take those and deliver that as a service to a customer? So that's been one of the big changes. So I see Cato kind of growing the way they have. They've built a great product. Palo now coming in, and like Palo, just if you look at the last Gartner, they literally are the upper right-hand leader in a single vendor SASE solution. Meraki has added some feature sets, but Meraki has basically kind of stayed to be that edge firewall with some SD-WAN capabilities. Now, Cisco does have Umbrella. If I kind of draw it over here because I kind of ran out of space, they do have a cloud secure web gateway service called Umbrella, but you're actually kind of building VPN tunnels from every location. And the client experience then, although the client works up here, it's not a VPN client coming back down in there, or there's nothing on the ZTNA side. So Meraki is still a good solution for, at least we found, for a number of retail environments, simpler environments. But the moment we're getting into more complicated customers that really, downtime is important. Resiliency means real dollars to them. Then, and they've got, cybersecurity or compliance pressures, then they're usually looking at the kinds of things from a Cato, from a Palo, these kinds of things.
When you mentioned those, I noticed you left out Velo, and I know they were kind of a really one of the first true SD-WAN solutions that came into the market that really took off like wildfire, and then they had a really good position. We don't hear as much about them today. What do you see with their development journey, and where do you guys position them today?
Sure. It's probably my mistake that I left it out of there, so I appreciate you telling me. They still are a fabulous SD-WAN solution. I mean, of all of the SD-WAN edges, Velo Cloud is without a doubt the most robust, fastest converging on routes. They have a whole series of global gateways to connect locations together. Velo still is an outstanding SD-WAN edge product. VMware has lagged behind having that cloud security, having that SSE component that Cato does well, that Palo does well. So there are times when we talk to a customer, like if a customer came to us, I mentioned MPLS. That customer came to us and they had, a large layer 2 or MPLS that they needed to keep in place. Like let's say a layer 2 network, oftentimes that's about, shaving 10 milliseconds between Chicago and New Orleans, because those are their distribution centers and they've got an application that's latency sensitive. Financial is kind of some of those that you see that sometimes in the financial world. The moment anybody's got a layer 2 MPLS network that they want to combine as well with internet, Velo is by far the most capable, quickest converging. It can actually place its overlay across any kind of circuit. Cato's a little different that way. Cato doesn't actually place their routing overlay across MPLS or layer 2 circuits. So Velo is still strong. I get excited about Palo because it's both the edge, SD-WAN, and the Prisma, but we've got many customers that are using Velo at the edge, but using Prisma in the cloud. So
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. You mentioned, Cato doesn't really play well in the layer 2 MPLS neighborhood. I'm assuming Meraki, same situation.
yes.
Now, with either one of those, though, can you configure one of the ports to be able to communicate back and forth site to site, or is it just not going to work across a layer 2 or an MPLS connection?
It will work. I would prefer Cato in that situation, to my knowledge. Cato in that situation is going to support BGP peering. It's going to kind of consider it on the edge here. Meraki, I think, possibly has added some of that in their newest release, but they were way behind. But I would never, ever suggest somebody who was in a layer 2 MPLS environment of using Meraki as an SD-WAN fabric. I would be suggesting, now we don't carry Cato, but it would be Cato, Palo, Velo, with Velo being the most capable and robust of all those. But yeah, I would never put a Meraki on a layer 2.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the layer two still exists, as you said, for latency specific applications. So what's a realistic latency expectation if you are going to a cloud gateway type product, like a Velo or a Cato or a Palo,
God,
and
that's
you're going to
hard.
be leveraging those gateways?
Um,
I don't need a very,
yeah,
an exact number. I'm just curious.
I
Is
mean,
it really distance driven,
oh,
or is it?
it's all completely distance. I say that, let's say I got, Comcast right here,
Mhm.
and I got, Lumen right here. Okay. Um, if I'm just going out Meraki and I'm going to a SaaS application, and that SaaS application, is, I don't know, sitting on some other internet service provider, we'll call it X. We are completely at the vagaries of what's between all of these things, all these pops here. Okay.
Sure.
With something like a Cato gateway involved, with a Palo gateway, even with a Velo Cloud gateway, those gateways are sitting in bigger data centers, and you've got some protection between the site and those gateways. So you've got some protection here, so you can bypass around a bad connection. And then once you get to the gateways, they're sitting in data centers, and so they should be closer to these applications. And so there certainly is an argument with the better SD-WAN technologies that have got gateways up there that we are going to protect against middle mile, which is where you see most of the problems, right? And then there is some argument that these gateways, these POPs are in, we're near content service providers, so that's a little better experience there. So it's probably not as much about reducing latency, although you hear people talk because it's in a POP, it's closer. It's probably not as much about reducing latency, in my opinion, as it is about protecting and routing around middle mile problems between here and between gateways getting out to those applications.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, if we look back, and I don't have the data in front of me, but if we look back at tickets where we've had, latency issues, we've had, problematic performance issues, more often than not, it comes down to a bad hop that we have to route around, or that we need to leverage the technology to route around. And it's nice when it just does it for you.
Now,
So
I will
that,
tell you, there's one thing, and I don't know if we talked about this before or not. When Palo bought CloudGenix, they acquired a technology. CloudGenix was very strong at layer 7 application
right.
tracking. And so they took that technology and rebranded it what they call ADAM, Autonomous Digital Experience Management, similar to Cisco's Thousand Eyes. Cisco bought Thousand Eyes. And so this technology is interesting. And if I get a PC here that says I'm having problems getting to an application, whether that application is sitting in the data center, whether it's sitting up in the cloud, even if I'm getting it from a PC to a cloud or a PC back across this fabric, this ADEM technology actually, through both looking at the traffic flow going through these points and then doing synthetic pings and trace routes along the way, can literally say, all right, this PC right here has got a CPU problem because the ADM client runs on the PC. It's got a CPU problem, or it's got a Wi-Fi access problem, or the problem is the response of this router, or the problem is the response of this Comcast or this other circuit here, and so there is one of the things you're going to see, and VeloCloud did this with a thing called ENI, and I think Cato probably will get move that direction too. Is that more and more people are also wanting to say, okay, when I do have a problem with a customer and with my employee, whether they're working in an office or they're working from home, and they say I can't get to an application reliably. In the past, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Do you have good internet? What's you do? Do a ping. This actually, through a series of kind of synthetic data, will keep track of this, and even be able to show a graph. You can literally go to a user, to Matt, and take a look at a group of applications and show a chart of the performance of these applications. And so I think that's one of the next steps too, because the security fabric we're starting to address pretty well with some of these new technologies talked about. But now, how do I keep track of application performance and then start to alert on that application performance? And that in particular, I think, is an interesting thing Palo's doing. I think we're going to see that across the board coming.
Alert and troubleshoot, right? I mean,
Yes.
because if you've got that visibility, that's saves a ton of time for your IT team and the folks who are trying to figure out where the issue lies.
Yep. Yeah. So kind of the first part of these technologies is helping the connection be robust, steer around those things. But when stuff does happen, because it does and will, then do you have some kind of application layer reporting and troubleshooting about where that problem is along the way? Yep.
Matt, this is perfect. Every time we talk, I learn something else, and I could spend probably another 2 hours just going through different scenarios with you. But this was super helpful. Thank you very much for doing this. Just to summarize, sincerely appreciate you taking the time to go through this. I think the visual of the whiteboard session, I always learn something every time you come to we have a conversation. So thank you very much.
Okay.
For customers who are interested in one of the solutions that we talked about today, CBTS will add a managed service layer around that, so you guys can help them manage or co-manage any of those solutions. Correct?
Absolutely. We deliver a full end-to-end experience, meaning that we want to meet and do a consultative meeting and see, are we the right fit? If we are the right fit, we've got professional project management teams that have done this at scale. I mean, we've literally installed 1,000 SD-WAN locations for a customer a year. So we have the ability to deliver at the scale. That's always a challenge, right? People come in and say, we're going to deliver this as a managed service, and then it takes forever to install it. So we've got professional project management teams can install at scale. And so we assign a project management, we assign subject matter experts. We walk with you. What are those applications? Where do they sit? What are we trying to protect? Help them design and install that, and then support day 2 support on it. Now, when we do it though as a managed service, we still give you complete access to all the administrative interfaces. So you're not buying a black box. It's completely co-managed, and we'll even fix mistakes you might make. So yeah, but with that's the kind of thing, is help people to figure out, is it the right technology? How do we make your applications flow? How do we give that security fabric? And then we'll do that entire project management and delivery. Yep.
Matt, again, sincerely appreciate it. I know you guys are a real class act over there at CBTS. We've had great experience with the customers we've worked with you on. If you, for our viewers out there, if you found value in the information today, and the being able to sit in with an expert in the field who's been doing this for a nice long time, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. I appreciate it, John. I appreciate it. A lot of fun.